The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink as John drove his sleek German sedan along the winding road that snaked between the sprawling farmlands of Serene Valley. The silence inside the car contrasted with the storm of thoughts in his mind. At 45, John had achieved more than he ever dreamed, yet something still felt missing. His fingers drummed on the leather steering wheel, the only sound apart from the soft purr of the engine. The clock on the dashboard showed 7:37 p.m., reminding him he was late for the business dinner in the neighboring town of Oakwood. John sighed, adjusting his silk tie with one hand while keeping the wheel steady with the other. The road ahead seemed endless, bordered by golden fields of corn swaying in the early evening breeze. It was a picture-perfect country scene, so far from the world of skyscrapers and meeting rooms he was used to. For a moment, John allowed himself to relax, his tense shoulders dropping slightly. That was when something caught his eye in the rearview mirror. Two small figures by the side of the road, almost hidden by the growing shadows of dusk. John frowned, instinctively slowing down. As he got closer, the shapes took form. Two children, each no taller than 3 feet, holding hands. John's heart sped up. What were two children doing alone on a deserted road at this hour? His foot hovered between the gas and the brake. The business dinner was important, potentially a multi-million-dollar contract, but the children. Before he could make a conscious decision, John had already pulled over onto the shoulder a few yards ahead of the children. He turned off the engine and remained still for a moment, watching them in the rearview mirror. The two children, twins he realized, remained where they were, gazing in his direction with a mix of fear and hope on their young faces. John took a deep breath and opened the car door. The cool night air enveloped him, carrying the scent of damp earth and freshly cut grass. His carefully polished Italian shoes sank slightly into the soft shoulder as he turned to face the children. Under the fading light of day, John could see they were a boy and a girl, both with light hair and wide, deep blue eyes. They couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Their clothes were dirty and rumpled, as if they had spent hours playing or running through fields and woods. "Hello," John called gently, taking a hesitant step toward the children. "Are you all right? Are you lost?" The children did not respond. Instead, the boy gripped his sister's hand and pointed frantically to something behind John, in the opposite direction of the road. The girl sobbed silently, tears rolling down her grimy cheeks. John followed the boy's trembling finger, narrowing his eyes to see through the growing darkness. At first, he saw nothing but the empty road and the surrounding fields. Then a metallic glint caught his eye. Partially concealed by tall bushes about 50 yards from the road was a car. The windows were dark, and even from a distance, John could see it was at an odd angle, as if it had skidded off the road. A chill ran down his spine. John looked back at the children, noticing for the first time the scratches on their arms and the palpable fear in their eyes. Something terrible had happened here. "Did you come from that car?" John asked gently, pointing to the abandoned vehicle. The children nodded in unison, their eyes never leaving his face. He hesitated, torn between the desire to help and the fear of the unknown. His phone felt heavy in his blazer pocket. Should he call the police? But what if someone was hurt in the car and needed immediate help? "Wait right here," John told the children, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm going to check the car. Don't move, okay?" The children did not reply, but neither did they show any intention of running off. John took a deep breath, straightened his blazer, and started walking toward the abandoned car. The tall grass brushed against his legs as he left the road, his steps muffled by the soft ground. As he drew closer to the vehicle, details became clearer. It was an older model, maybe 10 years or more, covered in scratches and dents. The driver's door was slightly ajar, and John could see the dark interior through the opening. John's heart thundered in his chest as he approached. Something about the scene deeply disturbed him. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant buzz of insects and the occasional hoot of a nightbird. Just a few steps away from the car, John stopped. Should he call out before getting closer? What if someone inside was hurt, or worse? The implications of what he might find hit him hard, and he almost turned back right then. But then he remembered the children's frightened eyes, the desperation in their gestures. They needed help, and for some reason, fate had placed John in their path. He couldn't just leave. With one last deep breath to calm himself, John took the final steps to the car and placed his hand on the driver's door. The metal felt cold to the touch, a silent reminder of how long the vehicle had been there. "Hello," John called, his voice echoing oddly in the nighttime stillness. "Is anyone in there? Do you need help?" There was no response. Heart pounding, John fully opened the driver's door. The interior was dark, but the faint twilight was enough to reveal a scene that made John's blood run cold. In the driver's seat, partially reclined and unmoving, was a woman. Her face was turned away from the door, but John could see dark stains on her clothes. Blood, he realized with a jolt of horror. For a moment, John was paralyzed, unable to move or think. Then, as if waking from a trance, he leaned into the car, his fingers trembling as he searched for the woman's pulse. Her skin was cold, but John almost cried out in relief. There was a pulse, weak and irregular. But there, she was alive. John drew back, his mind spinning. The woman needed urgent medical attention. The children, her children presumably, were alone and terrified. And he, a stranger in an expensive suit and a luxury car, was the only person around to do anything about it. As he pulled his phone from his pocket to call an ambulance, John glanced back toward the road. The two children were still there, two small silhouettes against the darkening sky, watching him with a mix of fear and hope. In that moment, John knew his life was about to change forever. The business dinner, the $1 million contract, his carefully planned routine, all of it seemed insignificant in the face of the drama unfolding before him. As he dialed the emergency number, John made a silent promise to the children and the unconscious woman in the car. He didn't know how, but he would do everything in his power to help them. Fate had brought them together on that lonely road, and John was determined not to fail them. The operator picked up, and John began describing the situation, his voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions in his chest. Night was only beginning, and with it, a journey none of them could have foreseen. John approached the abandoned car, his heart pounding. The driver's door was slightly ajar, creaking softly in the night breeze. As he got closer, he could make out a still figure in the seat. "Hello?" he called, his voice trembling slightly. There was no response. Summoning his courage, John opened the door completely. What he saw made his stomach turn. A young woman, who looked no older than her early 30s, was slumped in the seat. Her pale face was marked by bruises, and a trickle of blood ran from a cut on her forehead. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow and uneven. John swallowed hard, fighting off nausea. Carefully, he leaned into the car, checking the woman's pulse. He found it, weak but present. "Ma'am," he called again, louder this time. "Can you hear me?" A low moan escaped the woman's lips, her eyes moving rapidly behind her closed lids. Suddenly, a flash of memory crossed John's mind, so vivid he almost lost his balance. Jen trembled as she set the table for dinner. The clock on the wall seemed to taunt her, each tick reminding her that Rick would be home soon. The children were already in bed. She always made sure of that before he returned. The sound of tires outside made her stomach churn. The door opened with a slam, and the smell of alcohol reached her before Rick did. "Where's my dinner?" he growled, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. "It's ready, honey," Jen replied hastily, forcing a smile. "Sit down. I'll serve you." But something in her tone must have annoyed him. In an instant, Rick was by her side, grabbing her arm with enough force to leave marks. "Don't tell me what to do in my own house," he hissed, his breath hot and stale against her face. Jen closed her eyes, bracing herself for what would come next. John blinked, returning to the present. The flashback, so unexpected and intense, left him stunned. Somehow he knew it was a real memory, not his, but the woman's. Jen. Her name was Jen. A sound behind him made him turn sharply. The two children were now just a few steps away, watching him with a mix of fear and hope. "Mommy?" the little girl whispered, her voice trembling. John's heart clenched. He stepped away from the car, kneeling to get on the children's level. "Your mother is hurt," he explained gently. "But I'm calling for help right now. You are very brave to ask for help." The boy took a step forward. "It was Daddy," he said, his small voice firm. "He hurt Mommy again." The words hit John like a punch. Again. The implication was clear and devastating. He looked back at Jen, noticing for the first time the finger marks on her neck. Another flashback struck him. Jen was driving along a dark road, her hands trembling on the wheel. In the back seat, the children slept. She kept checking the rearview mirror, terrified of seeing Rick's headlights. "This time will be different," she murmured to herself. But then lights appeared behind her. The familiar growl of Rick's engine drew closer, fast. "No, no, no," Jen cried, pressing the accelerator hard. The road curved sharply. Jen knew she was going too fast, but fear kept her from slowing down. Rick's car was almost on top of hers. As they hit the curve, Jen lost control. The car skidded off the road. The world spun. And then? John shook his head, dispelling the vision. With trembling hands, he took out his phone and dialed the emergency number, giving them his location and a brief description of the situation. Hanging up, John turned to the children. "What are your names?" he asked softly. "I'm Emily," the girl answered, "and this is my brother Liam." John nodded, offering a reassuring smile. Emily and Liam. Those are lovely names. Help is on the way. Your mother will be all right. While they waited, John tried to keep the children distracted, asking about their favorite places and games. He glanced frequently at the car, making sure Jen's condition wasn't worsening. After what felt like an eternity, the distant sound of sirens reached his ears. John exhaled a sigh of relief. "Do you hear that?" he said to the children. "That's the ambulance coming to help your mom." Soon the ambulance lights illuminated the scene. Paramedics jumped out, rushing toward the crashed car. John stood up, gently holding Emily and Liam's hands. "Let the medics take care of your mom, okay?" he said softly. "You were very brave." While the paramedics worked, John stayed with the children, offering words of comfort. The police arrived shortly after, and John found himself explaining the situation, leaving out details of the inexplicable flashbacks. "Sir," one of the officers approached. "The children need to go to the hospital too for a checkup, but they seem reluctant to leave you." John looked down, noticing that Emily and Liam were clinging to his legs. Making a decision that would change his life forever, John knelt down again. "How about I go with you to the hospital? That way, we can keep an eye on your mom together. What do you think?" Emily and Liam's faces lit up with relief. They nodded eagerly. As he guided the children into the ambulance, John couldn't help but think how completely his night had changed. Sitting in the vehicle with Emily and Liam snuggled against him, John made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to protect this hurt family and help them find the safety and peace they deserved. The characteristic smell of antiseptic hung in the hospital waiting room air. John shifted in the uncomfortable chair, his expensive suit seeming oddly out of place against the white, sterile walls. Emily and Liam had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from the night's trauma, their heads resting on his thighs. While he waited for news on Jen's condition, John found himself plunged into memories of his own childhood that he had long suppressed. The monotonous ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to transport him back in time. John, just 6 years old, crouched in the corner of his small apartment's kitchen, watching his mother, Beth, prepare dinner with trembling hands. The smell of alcohol surrounded his father, Peter, who staggered around the living room, muttering incoherently. "Where's my dinner, woman?" Peter's voice boomed, making John cower even more. "It's almost ready, dear," Beth replied softly, trying to remain calm. But patience had never been Peter's strong suit. With a roar of anger, he stormed into the kitchen, grabbing Beth's arm with enough force to bruise it. The plate she was holding fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. "Look what you did!" Peter shouted, raising his hand. John shook his head, snapping out of the painful memory. His heart was racing as if he had relived the moment. He looked at Emily and Liam, still sleeping, and felt a wave of protectiveness wash over him. No child should ever go through that. His mind wandered to the years that followed his own childhood. After that fateful night when Beth finally found the courage to leave Peter, life did not immediately become easier. John remembered nights in shelters, constantly changing schools, and the monumental effort his mother made to keep a roof over their heads. But he also remembered resilience, Beth's determination to provide a better life for her son the night she studied after long work hours, pursuing an education that would lead to a better job. John closed his eyes, recalling the day when, at 18, he received his university acceptance letter. The pride in his mother's eyes, the tears of joy they both shed. It was the beginning of his rise. Years of hard study, sleepless nights, and fierce determination propelled him to the top. By 30, John was already a respected executive. By 35, he founded his own company, and now, at 45, he was one of the most successful businessmen in the country. Yet, sitting in that waiting room, John wondered if all that success really mattered. What was the point of having millions in the bank if he didn't use that privilege to make a difference in someone's life? His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a middle-aged woman in a simple blazer, holding a folder. She looked around the waiting room before approaching John. "Mr. Smith?" she asked softly, careful not to wake the children. "I'm Sarah Johnson, the social worker assigned to this case." John nodded, carefully moving Emily and Liam so he could stand without disturbing them. He and Sarah stepped aside a bit, keeping the children within sight. "How is Mrs. Miller?" John asked, recalling the surname he had heard earlier. Sarah sighed, her face showing a mix of concern and restrained relief. "Jen is stable, but still unconscious. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but the next few days will be crucial." John released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "And the children?" Sarah glanced compassionately at Emily and Liam. "Physically, they're okay. Some minor scratches and bruises. Emotionally, well, that will take longer to assess and treat." "What about their father?" John asked, tension creeping into his voice. Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "Rick Miller is wanted by the police. We have a history of domestic disturbance calls, but—" She sighed, frustration evident in her voice. Jen always refused to press charges. John felt a wave of anger, quickly followed by understanding. He knew from personal experience how hard it could be for a victim to leave an abusive relationship. "What happens to Emily and Liam now?" John asked, his gaze drifting back to the sleeping children. Sarah hesitated for a moment. Normally, in cases like this, the children would be placed in temporary foster care while we look for relatives who can take them in. But given the delicate situation and the trauma they've experienced, John didn't let her finish. "I can take care of them," he said, the words slipping out before he could think. Sarah looked at him in surprise. "Mr. Smith, I appreciate your offer, but you have no connection to this family. There are protocols, evaluations—" "I know," John interrupted gently, "and I'm willing to go through any necessary process. But these children have been through enough. They trust me. At least let me offer them a safe place to stay until their mother recovers." Sarah studied John for a long moment, as though trying to decipher his motivations. "This is unusual, Mr. Smith. May I ask why you're so invested in this case?" John felt a lump form in his throat. He looked again at Emily and Liam, then back at Sarah. "Because I've been in their shoes," he said softly. "And I know what it would have meant to have someone willing to help without expecting anything in return." Something in John's tone or the sincerity of his words seemed to resonate with Sarah. She nodded slowly. "I'll need to run some background checks and do a quick assessment of your home. And it would only be temporary, understand?" "Of course," John agreed quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes." At that moment, Emily stirred, her sleepy eyes opening. Seeing John, she reached out her arms, silently asking to be picked up. Without hesitation, John lifted her, cradling her against his chest. Sarah observed the interaction with a mixture of surprise and approval. "Well," she said, a small smile forming on her lips, "it seems you've already won at least one fan." John smiled gently, feeling the comforting weight of Emily in his arms. "They deserve some peace and security," he said, "and I have more than I need. It just feels right." Sarah nodded, making a few notes in her folder. "I'll start the process. In the meantime, you can stay with the children here at the hospital. I'll arrange for a more comfortable room for you." As Sarah walked away to make the necessary arrangements, John sat down again, Emily still nestled in his arms, and Liam sleeping peacefully by his side. He knew the days ahead would be challenging, with legal and emotional hurdles to overcome. But for the first time in a while, John felt he was exactly where he needed to be. Looking at the children, John made a silent promise. He would use every resource at his disposal to protect Emily, Liam, and Jen, to give them the chance his own mother had so bravely given him years ago. A chance for a new beginning, a life free of fear. With that resolution firmly in his heart, John braced himself for the days to come, knowing that no matter the challenges, he would not fail this family fate had placed in his path. The hospital room was immersed in a silence broken only by the rhythmic beep of the heart monitors. Jen lay motionless on the bed, her pale face contrasting with the bruises beginning to darken. John sat in a nearby chair, Emily asleep in his lap, and Liam curled up beside him. He watched Jen intently, waiting for any sign that she might awaken. A slight flutter of her eyelids was the first thing that caught John's attention. He leaned forward, his heart racing with both anticipation and concern. Slowly, Jen's eyes opened, unfocused and confused. For a moment, she stayed still, as if trying to figure out where she was. Then, suddenly, panic took hold. Jen sat up abruptly, her eyes wide with fear, her hands gripping the sheet so tightly her knuckles turned white. "No, no," she mumbled, her voice hoarse and shaky. "The children? Where are my children?" John stood quickly, still holding Emily. "Jen," he said gently, trying not to alarm her further. "It's all right. You're safe. The children are here. They're fine." Jen's eyes fixed on John, then on the children. For a moment, confusion dominated her face, followed by a flicker of recognition. You helped us," she whispered. John nodded, stepping closer to the bed. "My name is John. I found you on the road. Do you remember?" Jen closed her eyes for a moment, as if trying to organize her memories. When she opened them again, they were filled with tears. I thought we had died. Rick." At the sound of her husband's name, Jen visibly trembled. John felt a surge of anger, but kept his voice calm. "Rick isn't here. You and the kids are safe." At that moment, Emily stirred in John's arms, her eyes opening sleepily. Seeing her mother awake, she let out a small cry of joy. "Mommy!" Jen reached out, ignoring the pain the movement caused. John gently placed Emily on the bed, and the girl immediately snuggled next to her mother. Liam, awakened by the commotion, joined them, his small arms carefully wrapping around Jen. "My loves," Jen whispered, kissing the tops of their heads. "Are you okay? He didn't hurt you?" "We're fine, Mommy," Liam answered, his voice muffled against Jen's shoulder. "Mr. John took care of us." Jen looked at John, gratitude and confusion mingling in her gaze. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how." John raised a hand, gently cutting her off. "No need to thank me. I'm just glad I could help." For a few moments the room fell silent, Jen hugging her children as if her life depended on it. John watched, feeling both like an intruder and a protector. Finally, Jen spoke again, her voice low and shaky. "I tried to run away so many times," she said, more to herself than to John. "But he always found us." "Always?" John sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to invade her space. "You were very brave," he said gently. Leaving isn't easy." Jen let out a bitter laugh. "Brave? I should have left years ago. Before the kids." Her voice faltered, tears running down her cheeks. "Mommy," Emily said, her tiny hand wiping away Jen's tears. "Don't cry. Daddy won't hurt you anymore," Mr. John promised. Jen looked at John in surprise. He nodded in confirmation. "I promised them I would do everything I could to keep you safe," he explained, "and I intend to keep that promise." "But how?" Jen asked, fear evident in her voice. "You don't know Rick. He'll find us. He always does." John took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Jen, I have resources. I can offer you and the children a safe place to stay, protection, anything you need." Jen stared at him, distrust mingling with a spark of hope in her eyes. "Why? Why would you do that for us? You don't even know us." John hesitated for a moment, then decided on honesty. "Because I've been where your children are," he said softly. "My mother was also a victim of abuse. I know what it's like to live in fear, always waiting for the next outburst." Jen's eyes widened at the revelation. "What happened?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "My mother found the courage to leave," John replied. "It was hard, but she did it. And now I have a chance to pay it forward, to do for another family what someone once did for us." Jen was silent for a long moment, absorbing John's words. Finally she spoke, her voice trembling but laced with determination. "I want to leave. I want my children to be safe. But I'm so afraid." John reached out hesitantly, and when Jen didn't pull away, he gently took her hand. "Fear is natural," he said, "but you're not alone in this. There are people willing to help. I'm willing to help." Jen looked at her children, then back at John. "What if he finds us again?" "He won't," John said firmly. "I'll do everything in my power to make sure of that. You can stay at one of my properties, with security. I can arrange lawyers, therapists, whatever you need." Jen seemed to be fighting an internal battle, fear clashing with hope. "I don't know. It's so much to process." John nodded, understandingly. "You don't have to decide right now. Rest, recover. I'll be here when you're ready to talk more." At that moment, a nurse entered the room, smiling at seeing Jen awake. "So good to see you conscious, Mrs. Miller. I'll call the doctor to examine you." While the nurse checked Jen's vitals, John stood. "I'll leave you all alone for a moment," he said. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." Jen nodded, still looking a bit dazed. Just as John was about to leave the room, she called after him. "John?" He turned, meeting her eyes. "Yes?" "Thank you," Jen said softly. "For everything?" John smiled gently. "It's my pleasure, Jen. Get some rest now. We're all here for you." As he closed the door behind him, John felt a mix of emotions. Relief that Jen was awake, concern for the long recovery ahead, and a renewed determination to do everything in his power to help this family find the safety and peace they deserved. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the country house as John's car pulled up onto the gravel driveway. The property, hidden among gently rolling hills and surrounded by a dense grove, radiated a sense of peace and security. John turned off the engine and glanced into the back seat, where Jen sat between Emily and Liam. "We're here," he announced softly. Jen nodded, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and apprehension. After a week in the hospital, she was still visibly weak, but determined to move forward. John got out first, opening the door for Jen while the children hopped out, their eyes wide as they took in the unfamiliar surroundings. "It's so big," Emily exclaimed, spinning in circles to take it all in. Liam, always more cautious, held on to his mother's hand. "Are we going to live here, Mommy?" Jen ran her fingers through his hair. "For now, sweetheart, this is our safe haven." John led the family onto the wooden porch and through the front door. Inside, they found a cozy interior. Comfortable furniture, warm colors, and a stone fireplace dominated the living room. "Please make yourselves at home," John said, setting the suitcases down. "There are 3 bedrooms upstairs, a fully equipped kitchen, and an office that can double as a playroom for the kids." Emily and Liam, overcoming their initial hesitation, started exploring the house with growing excitement. Their laughter echoed through the halls, a sound that made Jen smile for the first time in days. "It's beautiful, John," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." John smiled kindly. "No need to thank me. Your safety and well-being are what matters most right now." He then showed Jen the security systems he had installed: cameras, alarms, and a direct line to a private security team. "No one can get close without us knowing," he assured her. Jen nodded, visibly relieved, though a shadow of worry still lingered in her eyes. In the days that followed, the family slowly began adjusting to their new reality. Emily and Liam, with the typical resilience of children, were the first to embrace the change. Emily discovered an old swing hanging from a sturdy tree in the backyard. Her joyful laughter as she swung higher and higher seemed to disperse a bit of the tension that still hovered over the house. Liam, meanwhile, became fascinated by the little stream running behind the property. He spent hours watching the fish and trying to hop from rock to rock, always under the watchful eye of either Jen or John. "Look, Mommy," Liam called one afternoon, holding up a small, smooth pebble. "It looks like a star." Jen smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. What do you think about putting it in a jar with the other ones you find?" The idea of a collection excited Liam, and soon he and Emily were competing to see who could find the most interesting stones. While the children flourished in their new environment, Jen battled her own internal demons. At night, after Emily and Liam were asleep, she often found herself on the porch, gazing at the stars and wrestling with memories that threatened to engulf her. It was on one of those nights that John found her, wrapped in a blanket, with silent tears rolling down her cheeks. "Jen?" he called gently, not wanting to startle her. She turned quickly, wiping the tears. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you." John shook his head, settling into a nearby chair. "You're not bothering me. Do you want to talk about it?" Jen stayed silent for a long moment before speaking. "I should be happy, relieved. We're safe, and the kids are happy. But I can't stop thinking. What if I had left sooner? What if I had been stronger?" John sighed softly. "Jen, you did the best you could under the circumstances. Leaving an abusive relationship is incredibly difficult. What's important is that you found the courage to do it now." "But the children," Jen began, her voice catching. "The children are safe now, thanks to you," John interrupted gently. "Look at how they're adapting, how happy they are here. You gave them a new chance." Jen nodded slowly, absorbing John's words. "Sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I hear his voice. I feel like he could show up at any moment." John leaned forward, his voice firm yet gentle. "He won't find you here, Jen, I promise. And in time, with help, those memories will lose their power over you." "Help?" Jen asked, frowning slightly. John nodded. "I hired a therapist specializing in trauma. She can come here if you feel comfortable. For you and the children, if you think it's necessary." Jen was silent for a moment, considering. I think that would be good," she finally said. John smiled encouragingly. "Great. One step at a time, okay? There's no rush." In the days that followed, Jen began to show small signs of progress. She smiled more often, especially when she played with the children. One afternoon, John found her in the kitchen, trying out a new recipe. "I've always wanted to learn how to cook better," she explained, a slight blush on her cheeks. "Rick always... Well, it doesn't matter now. I'm trying something new." John felt a surge of pride seeing Jen take such initiatives, however small. "I'm sure it'll be delicious," he said with a smile. As the weeks passed, the country house started to feel more like a home. Emily and Liam filled the rooms with colorful drawings and laughter. Jen, though still plagued by occasional nightmares, began moving with more confidence, her posture less tense. One night, after putting the children to bed, Jen found John in the living room. "John," she said softly, "I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for the house and for the safety, but for believing in me, in us, for giving us this chance to start over. John felt a knot in his throat. You all deserve it, Jen. You deserve peace and safety and happiness. Jen smiled, a small but genuine one. I know we still have a long way to go, but for the first time in years, I feel there's hope. And that means everything. As Jen headed upstairs to join the children, John remained behind in the living room, gazing out the window at the peaceful view. The temporary refuge was becoming more than just a safe place. It was becoming the starting point of a new life. And John was determined to do everything in his power to ensure Jen and the children had every chance to build the future they deserved. The peace that enveloped the country house was abruptly broken one Thursday afternoon. Jen was in the kitchen, making a snack for the children, when her phone vibrated with a message. The moment she saw the name on the screen, her face went pale. I know where you are. I'm taking back what's mine. Rick's words, cold and threatening, made Jen tremble. Her phone slipped from her shaking hands, landing on the kitchen floor with a dull thud. Emily, who was coloring at the table, looked at her mother with concern. Mommy, what's wrong? Jen forced a smile, trying to keep calm for her daughter. Nothing, sweetie. I just dropped my phone. But the damage was done. The fear Jen had fought so hard to overcome in recent weeks came crashing back, enveloping her like a thick, suffocating fog. That night, after the children were in bed, Jen sought out John in his office. With trembling hands, she showed him the message. John frowned, his expression a mix of concern and determination. Jen, don't worry. He's bluffing. There's no way he knows where you are. But what if he does? Jen insisted, panic evident in her voice. What if he comes after the children? John stood, placing his hands gently on Jen's shoulders. I won't let that happen. I promise you. In the days that followed, John doubled the security measures. Additional cameras were installed around the property, and a security team began regular patrols. He also contacted the authorities, informing them of Rick's threat. Despite John's reassurances, the fear had seeped into the house. Emily and Liam, sensitive to their mother's anxiety, began having frequent nightmares. One night, John was awakened by screaming coming from the children's room. He ran in to find Jen trying to calm a panicked Liam. He was here, Mommy, Liam sobbed, clinging to Jen. Daddy was in my room. Jen looked at John with tear-filled eyes, helpless in the face of her son's terror. John knelt next to the bed, speaking gently. Liam, look at me. You're safe. Your dad isn't here. It was just a bad dream. But the comforting words seemed to have little effect. In the days that followed, both Emily and Liam became hypervigilant. A sudden noise, like a branch tapping against the window, was enough to put them on high alert. John's presence, once reassuring, sometimes made them jump if he entered a room unexpectedly. Jen watched all this with a broken heart and a growing sense of guilt. One night, after tucking in the children, she found John on the porch. This can't go on, she said, her voice low but firm. I can't do this to you, to the kids. John looked at her, confused. What do you mean, Jen? We need to leave, she replied, tears shining in her eyes. Rick won't stop. He'll find us eventually, and you'll be in danger too. John shook his head firmly. Jen, no, running isn't the answer. You're safer here than anywhere. But at what cost? Jen asked. The kids are terrified. You've turned your life upside down for us. It's not fair. John stepped closer, gently taking Jen's hands. Listen to me. What's not fair is what Rick did to you and your children. You deserve peace and safety, and I'm committed to helping you achieve that. Jen let out a shaky sigh. I'm so afraid, John. Afraid he'll find us. Afraid the kids will never recover from this trauma. Afraid of... Of what? John asked softly when she hesitated. Of trusting, Jen finished in a whisper. Of believing we can really have a life free of him. John nodded sympathetically. Fear is natural, Jen. But you're not alone in this fight. We have resources, the authorities on our side. Rick won't win. At that moment, a shrill cry came from inside the house. Jen and John ran in to find Emily, trembling in the hallway. "There was someone at the window," she cried, pointing to her room. John immediately activated the security system and went to check, while Jen comforted Emily. After a thorough search, nothing was found. "It was probably a tree shadow," John explained gently to Emily. "But I'm proud of you for telling us. It's important to stay alert." When Emily finally calmed down and returned to bed, Jen turned to John, her face a mixture of determination and fear. "We can't keep living like this," she said. "The children need professional help. I need help." John nodded. "I agree. I'll arrange for the therapist to come more often. And Jen," he added, holding her gaze, "don't give up. You're stronger than Rick. Don't let him win by making you run again." Jen closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. When she opened them, there was a spark of resolve in them. "You're right," she said. "We're not going to run. We'll face this together." As they headed to their rooms, John made a silent promise. He would do everything in his power to keep this family safe and help them overcome this nightmare. The battle was far from over, but with determination and support, he believed they could win. John's office was dark, lit only by the bluish glow of his laptop. He had spent the last few hours poring over reports and documents, looking for anything that might help protect Jen and the children. That was when an email from his private investigator arrived, making John sit up straight, eyes wide in surprise. "Mr. Smith, investigations into Rick Miller have revealed a far more extensive network of illegal activities than we initially suspected." John devoured the email's contents, each paragraph uncovering a new layer of Rick's secret life. Astronomical gambling debts, connections to local criminal groups, money laundering schemes. The man who had terrorized Jen and the children was more dangerous than anyone realized. As he processed the information, John felt a wave of nausea, not just because of the danger Rick posed, but because of a shocking revelation about his own past. One of Rick's criminal associates had a painfully familiar name, Jack Hammer Hamilton. With trembling hands, John opened a desk drawer and took out an old photograph. In it, a young Beth, John's mother, stood shyly next to a severe-looking man, Peter Smith, John's abusive father. And in the background, almost hidden in the shadows, was Jack Hamilton. Memories long suppressed flooded John's mind, whispered conversations between his father and Jack, brown envelopes exchanged furtively, the constant fear in his mother's eyes. Suddenly, everything made terrible sense. John was pulled from his thoughts by a gentle knock on the door. It was Jen, her face pale in the dim light. "John, are you okay? You've been in here for hours." He hesitated for a moment, debating whether to share his discoveries or shield Jen from further worries. He chose honesty. "Jen, sit down. We have a lot to talk about." In the minutes that followed, John revealed everything he had uncovered about Rick, carefully omitting the connection to his own past for the moment. Jen listened in silence, her face a mix of shock and, surprisingly, relief. "I always knew there was more," she finally said, her voice steady. "The last few years never made sense. Money appearing and disappearing, strange phone calls in the middle of the night." John watched Jen with admiration. Where he expected fear, he saw growing determination in her eyes. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" Jen continued. "It's not just about us now. Rick is a threat to a lot more people." John nodded, impressed by Jen's emerging strength. "Yes, and that means we'll have more resources to stop him. The authorities will be far more involved now." Jen stood, pacing the office with an energy John had never seen in her. "We need to protect the kids, John, but I also want to help stop Rick. I know things. I've seen things over the years. Maybe I can be useful to the investigation." The transformation in Jen was palpable. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a fierce determination to protect not just her family, but potentially many other victims of Rick's criminal activities. In the days that followed, Jen worked tirelessly with John and the authorities, providing crucial information that helped unravel even more of Rick's criminal network. At the same time, she devoted herself to Emily and Liam with renewed energy, determined to help them overcome their traumas. One afternoon, as John watched Jen playing in the yard with Emily and Liam, Sarah, the social worker, arrived for a follow-up visit. "The change in her is amazing," Sarah commented, gazing through the window at the scene. "Jen seems like a completely different person." John nodded, a soft smile on his lips. She found a strength she didn't know she had. Sarah was silent for a moment, as though debating internally. Then, with a deep sigh, she turned to John. "You know, John, I understand more than you might think about what Jen's going through." John looked at her, curious. Sarah rarely spoke about her personal life. "I was also a victim of domestic violence," she revealed, her voice low but firm. "For 5 years, I lived with a man who destroyed a little more of me every day, until one day, like Jen, I found the courage to run." John listened silently and respectfully as Sarah shared her story of abuse, escape, and eventual recovery. "That's why I became a social worker," she concluded, "to help other women find the strength I did." Seeing Jen now, so determined and brave, it's like looking in a mirror of my own past. Sarah's revelation added a new layer of understanding to the situation. John felt a wave of gratitude for having her as an ally in this journey. That night, after the children were in bed, John finally told Jen about the connection he had discovered to his own past. "My father, he was involved with the same people as Rick," John revealed, showing Jen the old photo. "I think that's why I felt so compelled to help you from the start. In some way, I feel like I'm righting my father's wrongs." Jen listened quietly, her eyes filled with understanding and compassion. When John finished, she gently took his hand. "John, you're not your father. You're breaking the cycle, not just for your own family's past, but for mine as well, for Emily and Liam." Jen's words touched John deeply. In that moment, both felt the weight of their shared histories, but also the promise of a better future they were building together. As the night wore on, John and Jen remained on the porch, speaking in low voices about their pasts, their fears, and their hopes. The struggle was far from over, but for the first time, they both felt they had not only the strength, but each other's support to face whatever lay ahead. The day dawned cloudy, a sign of the drama about to unfold. Jen was in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the children when she heard the sound of tires on the gravel driveway. Her heart froze at the familiar roar of the engine. "Emily, Liam," she called, keeping her voice steady despite the rising panic. "Go to the safe room, now." Quickly and quietly, just like we practiced. The children, sensing the urgency in their mother's voice, obeyed instantly. Emily grabbed Liam's hand, guiding him to the hiding place John had prepared. Jen ran to John's office, finding him already on his feet, alerted by the sound of the car. "It's him," she whispered, fear evident in her eyes. John nodded grimly. "Stay here. I'll deal with this." Before Jen could protest, the front door flew open with a crash. Rick entered the house like a storm, his bloodshot eyes scanning the surroundings. "Jen!" he roared. "Where are you, you ungrateful—" John stood in the office doorway, blocking Rick's line of sight to Jen. "Rick," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you're not supposed to be here." Rick turned, surprised to see John, his eyes narrowed with anger. "Who the hell are you? Where's my family?" "I'm John Smith," he replied evenly. "Jen and the children are under my protection now. You need to leave." Rick let out a bitter laugh. "Protection? They're my family. You have no right to interfere." John took a step forward, hands raised in a pacifying gesture. "Rick, I know about your debts, your criminal ties. The authorities are on their way. You have one chance to do the right thing." Rick's face paled momentarily, but rage returned quickly. "You know nothing," he screamed, advancing menacingly. At that moment, Jen stepped out from behind John, her voice trembling but resolute. "Enough, Rick. It's over." Rick stopped, his eyes fixed on Jen. "You," he hissed, "you betrayed me, after everything I did for you." Jen straightened, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Everything you did for me? You beat me, humiliated me, terrified our children." The strength in Jen's voice seemed to unsettle Rick momentarily. He looked around, as if only now realizing where he was. "Where are Emily and Liam?" he asked, his voice suddenly quieter. "Safe," John answered. "Far away from you." Rick staggered to the couch, sinking into it with his head in his hands. "I just wanted to be a good father, a good husband." But it all went wrong. Jen and John exchanged surprised looks. It was the first time they had seen Rick show any hint of vulnerability. Meanwhile, in the safe room, Emily and Liam huddled together, listening to the muffled sounds of the confrontation downstairs. "I'm scared, Emily," Liam whispered, clinging to his sister. Emily hugged him tightly. "It'll be okay," she murmured, though her own voice trembled. "Mommy and Mr. John will protect us." Back in the living room, John approached Rick cautiously. "It's not too late to do the right thing, Rick. Think of the children." Rick lifted his head, his eyes red and damp. "I love them," he said in a rough voice, "but I don't know how to be the father they deserve." Jen, still keeping her distance, spoke gently. "The first step is admitting you need help, Rick, that what you did was wrong." For a long moment, Rick was silent, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then, as though a dam had broken, he began to speak. He spoke of his own abusive childhood, of financial pressures, of how alcohol had become his escape. "I became the monster I swore I'd never be," he concluded, tears streaming down his face. The distant sound of sirens broke the moment. Rick jumped up, panic evident in his eyes. "Rick," John said firmly, "you have a choice now. You can run and continue this cycle, or you can face the consequences and seek help." Jen took a step forward, her voice surprisingly soft. "Think of the children, Rick. What example do you want to set for them?" Rick looked at Jen, then at John, and finally at the door. For a moment he seemed ready to bolt, but then his shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." When the police arrived moments later, they found Rick sitting calmly on the couch, head bowed. Jen stood beside John, both visibly shaken but resolute. As the officers put the cuffs on Rick, John went to get the children. He found Emily and Liam huddled together in the safe room, Emily still comforting Liam. "It's all right now," John said softly. "You were both very brave." As Emily and Liam emerged, they saw their father being taken away. Rick paused for a moment, looking at his children with a mix of shame and regret. "Daddy?" Liam asked hesitantly. Rick swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, kids." "Daddy?" "Daddy has to go away for a while to get better." As Rick was led out, Jen pulled her children close, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. John stood beside them, a reassuring and protective presence. The confrontation was over, but they all knew the healing journey had only just begun. Yet for the first time in a long time, there was a spark of hope in the air, the hope of a new beginning and broken cycles. The weeks after Rick's confrontation were marked by a mix of relief and apprehension. The country house, once tense, began to breathe more freely, yet the emotional scars were still fresh, requiring care and attention. Determined to help her children overcome the trauma, Jen started family therapy sessions with Dr. Elizabeth Liz Wilson, a psychologist specializing in domestic violence cases. The first sessions were challenging, with Emily and Liam initially reluctant to open up. "It's okay to be scared," Dr. Wilson assured them gently during one session. "What you went through was very scary, but this is a safe place to talk about it." Gradually, the children began to express themselves. Emily used drawings, depicting her family in happy situations, always with a dark shadow lingering at the edges of the paper. Liam, on the other hand, found comfort in telling stories about a brave knight who defended his castle from dragons. Jen watched her children with a mix of pain and hope. "They're so resilient," she told John one evening. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough to guide them through this." John, who had become a constant pillar of support, smiled gently. "You're stronger than you think, Jen. Look how far you've come." While Jen's family worked on healing, John faced his own demons. The revelations about his father's ties to the criminal underworld, combined with resurfaced memories of his turbulent childhood, led him to seek professional help as well. In sessions with Dr. David Anderson, John explored his repressed feelings of anger and fear toward his father. "I thought I'd moved past all this," John admitted during a particularly intense session. "But seeing the fear in Emily and Liam, it's like seeing my younger self all over again." Dr. Anderson nodded sympathetically. "Trauma has a way of re-emerging, John, especially when we face situations that mirror our past experiences. But it's also an opportunity for healing." Gradually, John began to reconcile his past with his present, understanding how his experiences had shaped him and driven him to protect Jen and the children so fiercely. Back at the country house, small signs of progress started appearing. One morning, John was surprised by the sound of laughter coming from the backyard. Looking out the window, he saw Emily and Liam happily playing tag, their faces lit by genuine smiles. "It's been so long since I heard them laugh like that," Jen remarked, joining John at the window, her eyes gleaming with tears of joy. The children's playful antics became more frequent and carefree. The constant fear that had once hovered over them began to recede, replaced by a renewed curiosity about the world around them. One afternoon, Liam shocked everyone by asking to go to the local park. "Can we go on the big slide?" he asked shyly, something that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. The visit to the park was a significant milestone. Though Jen was visibly tense at first, she relaxed upon seeing her children interacting cheerfully with other kids, their laughter echoing in the air. Meanwhile, many miles away, Rick was facing his own journey of healing. Detained and awaiting trial, he had been placed in an intensive rehabilitation program while in prison. Initially resistant, Rick gradually began to open up during therapy sessions and support groups. Facing the destructive patterns of his life and the pain he had caused his family was a painful but necessary process. "I want to be better," Rick admitted in a group session. "For me, but mostly for my kids. Even if they never forgive me, I want them to know I'm trying to change." News of Rick's efforts reached Jen through Sarah, the social worker. Jen received the information with conflicted emotions. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive him," Jen confessed to John. "But part of me hopes he really does change for our children's sake." As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the atmosphere at the country house continued to transform. Therapy sessions, though still emotionally intense, became less burdensome. Emily and Liam began to speak more openly about their feelings, using the tools Dr. Wilson had taught them to handle frightening memories or negative thoughts. John, for his part, felt a decades-old weight begin to lift. By helping Jen and the children, he was in some way healing his own past wounds. One evening, while the family was having dinner on the porch, enjoying the sunset, Jen looked around the table and felt a wave of gratitude. The path ahead was still long, but for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel genuine hope for the future. "Thank you," she said softly, looking at John. He smiled, understanding everything that simple word meant. "We're in this together," he replied. As the children giggled at one of Liam's jokes, Jen realized that despite all the difficulties, they were finally beginning to heal. It was a slow, sometimes painful process, but they were moving forward, one day at a time, toward a brighter future. Autumn arrived, bringing not only changing leaves, but also a tangible sense of transformation in Jen's life. As the emotional scars started to heal, a new sense of purpose emerged. Jen, inspired by her own journey of recovery, decided she wanted to do more than just overcome her personal trauma. One afternoon, after a particularly impactful therapy session, she shared her thoughts with John. "I want to help other women going through what I did," Jen said, her eyes shining with determination. Maybe I can use my experience to make a difference." John, impressed by her strength and compassion, supported her wholeheartedly. Together, they began researching local organizations that worked with domestic violence survivors. It was during this search that Jen reconnected with Sarah, the social worker who had been pivotal in her early days of escape. Sarah was in the process of organizing a support group for survivors of domestic violence and was thrilled when Jen offered to get involved. "Your story can inspire so many others, Jen," Sarah said, holding Jen's hands. "Show them there's hope, that life can be rebuilt." The first group meetings were emotionally intense. Jen, initially nervous, found strength in the solidarity of the other women. Sharing her story and hearing others' experiences created a powerful bond. "When I ran away with my children, I thought I was alone in the world," Jen shared in one session. "But now I see we're a community of survivors, strong and resilient." While Jen found her calling in activism and community support, John was also reassessing his priorities. Business success, once everything to him, now felt empty without a greater purpose. Inspired by Jen's courage and the impact his help had had on her life, John began redirecting resources from his company into social projects. He launched a scholarship program for young people from families affected by domestic violence and funded the construction of a shelter for women at risk. "Business is still important," John explained to his board of directors, "but I now see we have a bigger responsibility to our community." While the adults found new purpose, Emily and Liam faced their own challenges and triumphs. The decision to enroll them in a local daycare was met with some anxiety from Jen. "What if something happens? What if they don't adapt?" she asked John anxiously the night before the children's first day. John took her hand reassuringly. "They're stronger than we think, Jen, and this is an important step toward the normal life they deserve." The first days were a mix of anxiety and excitement. Emily, always more outgoing, quickly made friends with a girl named Sophie. Liam, more reserved, took a bit longer, but soon bonded with Max, a boy who shared his love of dinosaurs. Seeing the twins come home excited, sharing stories about their new friends and activities, brought tears to Jen's eyes. "They're really having a normal childhood," she whispered to John one afternoon, watching the children play in the backyard with some daycare friends. As the weeks turned into months, life found a new rhythm. Jen became a powerful voice in Sarah's support group, even helping lead some sessions. Her personal experience combined with her natural empathy made her a source of comfort and inspiration for many women. John, in turn, discovered a fulfillment in his philanthropic work that he had never experienced in his business accomplishments. Seeing the tangible impact of his projects on the community brought new meaning to his life. Emily and Liam flourished at daycare, gradually leaving their past traumas behind. Their nightmares decreased, replaced by dreams of adventures with their new friends. One Saturday afternoon, while the family enjoyed a picnic at the local park, Jen looked around and felt a wave of gratitude. John was playing tag with the kids, their laughter echoing in the air. Friends from daycare and their families had joined them, creating a scene of normalcy and joy that once seemed impossible. "We did it," Jen thought, a serene smile on her face. "We really rebuilt our lives." And there, under the autumn sun, surrounded by love and new possibilities, Jen knew that despite the challenges to come, they would face them together, stronger and more resilient than ever. Winter arrived with unexpected force, bringing biting cold and a series of challenges that tested the resilience of John, Jen, and the children. The peace they had fought for in recent months felt fragile in the face of the new hardships. John was in his office when he got news that would rock his company. His assistant rushed in, holding a tablet with the latest market headlines. "Mr. Smith, Technova just launched a product that directly competes with our main line. Our stocks are plummeting." John felt the blow like a punch to the gut. Technova, led by the ruthless Vince Sterling, was known for aggressive market tactics. This new product wasn't just a threat to John's business, it seemed specifically designed to undermine his company. In the days that followed, John was consumed by crisis meetings, desperately trying to find a solution to contain the damage. The long hours at the office and constant stress began taking a toll on his personal life, leaving him with less time and energy for Jen and the children. One evening, coming home late, John found Jen still awake, waiting for him in the living room. Her face showed deep worry, not just for him, but for something else that clearly troubled her. "John, we need to talk," Jen said softly. "It's about Rick." Even now, Rick's name made John tense. "What happened?" he asked, sitting next to her. Jen took a deep breath before continuing. "Rick's lawyer got in touch. He's asking for supervised visits with the children." John felt a surge of protectiveness and concern. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know," Jen admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Part of me wants to keep the kids as far from him as possible, but another part thinks it might be important for Emily and Liam to have some kind of relationship with their father, especially now that he's in rehab." The conversation that followed was long and emotionally charged. John, despite his personal reservations about Rick, knew he had to support Jen in whatever decision she made. "You don't have to decide anything now," he assured her. "We can take our time, talk to Dr. Wilson, see what's best for the kids." Jen nodded, grateful for John's understanding. As they talked, both felt a closeness that went beyond their developing friendship. There was a moment, a prolonged look, a tension in the air that hinted at something deeper, but they both hesitated, aware of the complexity of their situation. Their moment was interrupted by Jen's ringing phone. It was Sarah, the social worker, and her voice was urgent. "Jen, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but we have a problem. A journalist from the magazine Expose is asking questions about you and your story. He seems determined to publish something." Panic gripped Jen. The thought of having her private life, her trauma, and her struggles exposed to the public was terrifying. "What can we do?" she asked, her voice barely hiding her fear. Sarah promised to do everything possible to contain the situation, but the damage was done. In the days that followed, Jen found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid of seeing a photographer or reporter at every turn. John, torn between the crisis at his company and his desire to protect Jen and the children, felt pulled in all directions. He mobilized his legal team to deal with the journalist, but he knew it would be a tough battle against a tabloid press. Amid all the chaos, Emily and Liam seemed to sense the tension in the air. The children, who had made so much progress, began showing signs of regression. Liam went back to having nightmares, while Emily became more withdrawn at daycare. One afternoon, while John tried to work from home, juggling laptops and phones, he heard a noise from the children's room. Investigating, he found Emily and Liam hiding in the closet, hugging each other and crying quietly. "Hey, what's wrong?" John asked softly, kneeling down. "Are you going to send us back to Daddy?" Liam asked between sobs. John's heart broke. He realized that in all the whispered conversations and tense discussions, the children had picked up more than he and Jen imagined. "No, never," John assured them, pulling both in for a tight hug. "You're safe here. No one will take you anywhere you don't want to go." In that moment, John made a decision. He couldn't keep dividing his attention this way. Something had to change. That night, after putting the children to bed, John and Jen met on the porch, as they had so many times before. The air was cold, but their closeness gave them comforting warmth. "Jen," John began, his voice calm but determined, "I think we need to reevaluate some things." She looked at him, both curious and apprehensive. "What do you mean?" John took a deep breath. "I've been thinking maybe it's time I step back from the company, delegate more, and focus on what really matters." Jen stared at him, surprised. "John, you can't do that for us. Your company is important." "You and the kids are more important," John replied, taking Jen's hand in his. "I realized that all this time, building the company was to have security, to have something that was mine. But now I have something far more valuable to protect." The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Jen felt her heart race, a mix of gratitude and something deeper that had been growing between them for months. "John, she began, but words felt inadequate to express everything she felt. Slowly, almost hesitantly, John leaned in. Jen closed her eyes, feeling his breath so close to hers. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, full of promise and mutual understanding. When they parted, both had tears in their eyes. "This complicates everything, doesn't it?" Jen whispered, a small smile playing on her lips. John chuckled softly. "Life's already complicated. But this feels right." In the days that followed, John and Jen navigated their new dynamic carefully. They agreed to take it slow, aware of the children's need for stability. But there was a new light in their eyes, a deeper connection that strengthened them against the challenges they faced. John began the process of restructuring his company, delegating more responsibilities, and focusing on long-term strategies that would allow for a healthier work-life balance. The battle with Technova was far from over, but he now faced it with renewed perspective and determination. Jen, with John and his legal team's support, decided to confront the tabloid reporter head-on. Rather than hide, she chose to share her story on her own terms, granting an exclusive interview to a reputable newspaper. It was a scary step, but Jen felt it was a way to reclaim control of her narrative and potentially help others in similar situations. As for Rick's supervised visit request, Jen and John agreed to consult with Dr. Wilson and carefully assess Rick's progress in rehab before making any decision. The children's emotional well-being was the top priority. As winter began yielding to the first signs of spring, John, Jen, and the children felt more united than ever. The challenges had not vanished, but facing them together as a family made the burden lighter and the future brighter. One night, while they were watching the stars from the porch, Emily asked innocently, "Mr. John, are you going to be our new daddy?" John and Jen exchanged looks, a mixture of surprise and emotion on their faces. "What matters," John replied gently, "is that we're all here for each other. We're a family, no matter what." In that moment, under a starry sky, surrounded by the love they had built together, everyone felt that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they were exactly where they belonged. The day began with a palpable tension in the air. Jen looked at herself in the mirror, nervously straightening the blazer she had chosen for the occasion. Today was the day she would face her past head-on in court, where Rick would be tried for his crimes. John entered the room, his face a mix of concern and admiration. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Jen took a deep breath. "As ready as I can be," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. Over the past few weeks, John had worked tirelessly behind the scenes to protect Jen and the children's privacy. He used his media contacts and influence in business circles to curb the public's curiosity about the story. Thanks to his efforts, the children's identities remained confidential, and the media coverage focused more on the aspects of survival and domestic violence awareness than on sensationalized details. As they headed to the courthouse, John held Jen's hand, offering silent support. The children stayed in the care of Sarah, the social worker, who had become a trusted friend. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. Jen felt the weight of their gaze as she walked down the aisle, but she kept her head held high, determined not to be intimidated. When it was time for Jen's testimony, the room fell into a deafening silence. She took the stand, her eyes momentarily locking with Rick's, who looked smaller and more vulnerable than she remembered. Her voice was shaky at first, but gained strength with every word. As she recounted her story, she spoke of the early happy days of her marriage, of how the dream turned into a nightmare, of the physical and emotional abuse that haunted her and the children daily. "I asked myself every day if this would be the day he killed us," Jen said, her voice thick with emotion. "Living like that, it's not living, it's surviving." She described the night she ran away, the terror of being chased on the dark road, the accident that nearly cost her and her children their lives. Then, with tears in her eyes, she spoke about the help she received and the journey of healing and rediscovering herself. I'm here today not just for justice for me and my children, Jen concluded, her voice now firm and resolute. I'm here for all the other women and children still living in fear, to show them there is hope, that there is a way out. When Jen finished her testimony, there was a moment of absolute silence in the room, followed by a murmur of contained emotion. John, seated in the front row, had tears in his eyes, his chest swelling with pride for Jen's courage. The trial continued for a few more days, with other witnesses called to testify, including domestic violence experts and some of Rick's former criminal associates. During a recess, John received a call from Sarah. "You need to see this," she said, sounding excited, then sent him a video she had just recorded. In the video, Emily and Liam were in the backyard of the country house, laughing and playing without a care in the world. Emily spun around in circles, her arms outstretched, while Liam chased her, both screaming with joy. "It's the first time I've seen them so free," Sarah commented. "It's like a weight's been lifted off them." John showed the video to Jen, who couldn't hold back tears. Seeing her children so happy and carefree was the best reward she could have hoped for her bravery. On the final day of the trial, before sentencing was announced, Rick asked to speak. He stood, looking older and more remorseful. "I know nothing I say can undo the harm I caused," he began, his voice hoarse. "But I want Jen and my children to know I am deeply sorry. The rehab program made me see how monstrous my actions were." Rick then announced he was offering substantial financial support for Jen and the children, along with committing to continue therapy and never approach them again without permission. "I don't expect forgiveness," he concluded, "but I hope that someday, maybe, my children will know their father admitted his mistakes and tried to become better." The sentence was finally passed. Rick was given a prison term, with the requirement to continue psychological treatment and rehabilitation programs. As the court was dismissed, Jen found herself in a swirl of emotions. John enveloped her in a protective embrace, allowing her to finally release all the pent-up feelings. "It's over," he whispered. "You did it." In the days that followed, Jen and John watched Emily and Liam with joy as they changed. The children seemed lighter, laughing more easily, and playing with an abandon they hadn't shown in a long time. One afternoon, as everyone gathered in the living room, Liam timidly asked, "Mommy, is Daddy going to stay in prison forever?" Jen exchanged a glance with John before carefully replying, "Not forever, sweetheart, but for a good while. And when he's out, he'll keep getting help to be a better person." Emily, who was drawing, looked up. "Can we see Daddy one day?" John felt Jen tense beside him, but her voice was steady. "If you want to, when it's safe, maybe we can think about that. But don't worry about it now, okay?" The children seemed satisfied with that answer and went back to their activities. Jen leaned back on the sofa, feeling John's arm around her. "You handled that beautifully," he murmured. Jen smiled softly. "We're learning together, aren't we? One day at a time." That night, after the children went to sleep, John and Jen sat on the porch, as they had done so many times. But something felt different in the air, a sense of a new beginning. "What do you think about us moving?" John suggested suddenly. "Not far away, but maybe to a house we can truly call our own. A fresh start for all of us." Jen looked at him surprised, but a smile formed on her lips. "You mean, as a family?" John nodded, taking her hand. "If you want. I love you, Jen, and I love Emily and Liam as if they were my own children." Tears of happiness glistened in Jen's eyes. "We love you too, John. And yes, I'd love to begin this new chapter with you." As they kissed under the starry sky, both felt that despite all the challenges they had faced and those that might still come, they had found something precious, a second chance at love and life and the opportunity to build a bright future together. Spring arrived, bringing not only flowers and longer days, but a tangible sense of renewal for John, Jen, and the children. John's office was filled with light as he called a meeting with his executive team. "Ladies and gentlemen," John began, his voice brimming with determination, We've overcome one of the biggest crises in our history, but we won't simply go back to business as usual. It's time we redefine who we are as a company. In the months that followed, John's company underwent a remarkable transformation. They launched a new line of eco-friendly products and partnered with nonprofit organizations to promote social causes. Most surprisingly, they created an employment and training program for survivors of domestic violence. "We want to be more than just a profitable company," John explained in an interview. "We want to be a positive force in society." The shift was welcomed not just by employees, but also by the public. The company's stock began to rise, and John found himself leading not just a financial recovery, but an ethical revolution in business. Meanwhile, Jen was busy bringing a dream to life, one that had been born during her darkest days. With John's support and Sarah's guidance, she founded New Dawn, an organization dedicated to helping families affected by domestic violence. The foundation's opening was an emotional event. Jen, standing at the podium, looked out at the audience of survivors, volunteers, and supporters. "Each of us here knows darkness," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But we also know the strength that arises when we come together, when we refuse to let fear define us." New Dawn is not just about providing shelter or resources, it's about restoring hope, about showing that there's a future beyond abuse. John, seated in the front row with Emily and Liam, felt his chest swell with pride. Seeing Jen, who had arrived so broken at that country house months ago, now standing tall, determined to make a difference, was one of the most inspiring things he had ever witnessed. At home, life was blossoming in unexpected and wonderful ways. Emily and Liam, now 6 years old, were getting ready to start elementary school. What had once been a daunting prospect for the traumatized children was now a source of pure excitement. "Mommy, look at my new backpack," Emily exclaimed one afternoon, spinning around to show off the colorful accessory. Liam, not wanting to be outdone, held up his pencil case. "And I already know how to write my whole name," Jen laughed, pulling them both into a hug. "You're going to be the smartest kids in school, I'm sure." John, watching from the doorway, felt a wave of emotion wash over him. These everyday moments of joy, so simple yet so precious, were a constant reminder of why all the struggle had been worth it. As summer approached, John and Jen found themselves having increasingly serious conversations about their future together. One night, after the children were asleep, they sat on the porch, as they had done so many times. "Jen," John began, his voice gentle but determined, "I know we've been through a lot together. Our story isn't exactly conventional, but I want you to know, I love you. I love you and the children more than I ever thought I could love anyone." Jen felt tears welling in her eyes. "Oh, John, I love you too. You saved us in so many ways." John took her hands in his. "I'm not proposing marriage, not yet. I think we both know we need to give the children and ourselves time. But I want you to know I'm committed to this future, to our family." Jen nodded, smiling through her tears. "One step at a time, right? But together." "Together," John agreed, sealing the promise with a tender kiss. In the days that followed, John and Jen began making concrete plans for their future. They decided to look for a new home, a place they could truly call their own for their new-formed family. They chose the final Sunday before the school year started for a picnic in the park. The day was perfect, with a clear blue sky and a gentle breeze. John spread a blanket under a large tree, while Jen prepared the sandwiches they had brought. Emily and Liam ran to the nearby playground, their laughter echoing in the air. John and Jen watched them, hand in hand, amazed at the transformation they had witnessed. "Look at them," Jen whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "So happy, so free." John squeezed her hand gently. "They're incredible. And so are you." At that moment, the children waved excitedly from the top of the slide. "Mommy, John, come play with us." John glanced at Jen, a playful smile on his face. "What do you say? Think we still have the energy to keep up with them?" Jen laughed, already getting up. "Only one way to find out." Together they ran toward the playground, their laughter joining the children's. As they climbed the steps of the structure, John grabbed Jen's waist, twirling her in the air. She squealed in surprise and delight, clinging to him. Emily and Liam watched, giggling and clapping. Again, again, they cried in unison. When John finally set Jen back down, their eyes met. In that moment, surrounded by the children's laughter and the beauty of the day, they both felt an unshakable certainty. No matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together as a family. The sun was setting by the time they decided to head home. As they strolled through the park, Emily and Liam skipping ahead, John wrapped his arm around Jen's shoulders. "You know," he said softly, "I think we found our happy ending." Jen smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "No, John, we found our new beginning." And so, under a sky tinged with orange and pink, this new family walked toward their future, hearts full of love, hope, and the promise of better days to come.